Yes, indeed. Welcome to the Temple of Hip Hop. I am KRS-ONE. The Temple of Hip Hop is a hip hop preservation ministry, archive, school, and society. We're going to talk today about the building of that society. We've been walking through really the end of our gospel here. What we're going to do today is read track 5 of our gospel. We're at the very end here of the gospel of hip hop, and the lesson that we're actually getting into is a lesson about nation building. That's what we've been discussing, nation building, and of course, the idea here is hip hop as that nation that's being built. And so we're reading the origins of hip hop. And what's interesting is it's so funny because today this phrase is being thrown around, and there's like film projects and others, even books and articles coming out and have come out with the title "The Origins of Hip Hop" or "Origins of Hip Hop." But I am proud to say that we were the first with that title, and not in a bragging sense, not like that, but in the sense of being ahead of our time. In the sense of being ahead of our time, and not even bragging there, but to bring real truth and up-to-date learning, real-time learning to what it is we're teaching. We've been discussing the origins of hip-hop maybe 15 years now, even longer. There's a DVD actually, I'm sorry, a documentary. We printed DVDs, but there was a documentary called The Origins of Hip Hop, where we laid out the foundational principles to hip hop as culture. And we're here, obviously, we did that documentary, and then, of course, the Gospel of Hip Hop came out later. And in it is this last chapter, The Origins of Hip Hop. And, we read through this, the first four, they're called tracks. We break this lesson down into tracks. Or chapters, lessons, but we call them tracks here. The idea is to discuss hip hop's history in a new way, or in a way that, in an alternative way, a way that has not yet been discussed, or at least I haven't heard hip hop's history discussed in this way. And we talked about super historical hip hop. We talked about hip hop as an idea, not as an object, more as a subject, the way you document subjects. Those who have been studying with us, of course, we're going to go over this again. But if you've been studying with us, you've heard this language already. You've been reading the gospel, you've been studying these pieces. We've been highlighting the salient parts of our lessons so that we can remember them and go right back to them. So this is the origins of hip hop. You don't get a good history of anything without an origin, without knowing what the origin of something is. The origins of hip hop is not necessarily its history, but you can't have a history without an origin. So we're talking about the origins of hip hop, the ingredients that made it tick. And let me also take a moment here and say that the difference with this teaching is as well, the independence or the uniqueness of this particular teaching is that we're talking here about hip hop as culture. And of course, I'm fishing for words here because it's so simple yet it's so complicated. Hip hop, we're talking here about hip hop as culture, not as music. And I know that's so easy for us to say here, those who've been studying, you know the difference. But if you're listening for the first time, this may be a little much. Hip hop as culture, as community, as nation. Others are approaching hip hop as music, as dance, and as art. Now, of course, we are B-boys, B-girls, we are MCs, we are DJs, we are graffiti writers, and beatboxers. But the hip hop that we are teaching is our community, is our culture, is our nation, is our civilization. This is what we're building. This is what we're building. This is what we're going toward. This is the heritage that we're going to leave our children so that they don't have to scrounge and struggle the way we did coming up as hip hop. We have to leave our children something more valuable than we have to leave hip hop more valuable to our children than the way we found it. And that's only going to happen with a higher level of discipline, maturity, knowledge, of course, skill, these things. So I'm here at the origins of hip hop. We're going to read now the last chapter, the last track of of not only the lessons of the gospel, but of this particular overstanding, which is called the origins of hip hop. This is talking about revolutionaries that we may have forgotten about, ideas similar to our own that have been successful and have failed. We have to look at all of it, and we have to adjust ourselves and make our plans according to this. So let's get right into it. I'm at page 799 on paragraph 442, 442, page 799. As stated earlier, the origins of hip hop seem to be more black than African American. And such an observation seems to also manifest itself historically. We cannot really discuss the origins of hip hop without taking a look at the intentions of the 1950s and 1960s civil rights movement regarding our intentions today. When you begin to approach hip hop as an attitude and not just a music genre, you can even go back further than the 1930s and 1940s to really get an accurate assessment of the first causes and origins of modern hip hop today. When I look at people like Paul Robeson, for example, and keep in mind also, these are names that I'm name dropping right now, because these names you need to go back and really do the research on these people. Their life was amazing for their time, and these are our heroes. These are the ones that gave their lives, gave their careers, gave up opportunities, and willingly did so that others may be able to prosper. And that's the line of work that we're doing here today. We don't have to really give up much. I mean, what, you played on a video music show? That's not giving up anything. Not getting an award at American Music or whatever it is, that's not giving up anything. Some of the stories we're going to talk about here is people really giving up major career opportunities because they stood on principle. And this is something that our young people should really pay attention to as well as you grow up. Don't be a coward. You know, and a coward is not always somebody who's afraid to fight or afraid to get hit. A coward is also somebody who just conforms because they want to get something for themselves, so they're willing to sell out a whole movement because they can't join it, or they can't rise to it, or they see something in it for themselves, or whatever it is. That's a coward. But somebody to stand on truth, somebody willing to stand on a real principle, stand for something. And when you stand for something, you might have to forfeit your opportunity in whatever it is you're criticizing. Let's read on. And that's why I wanted to stop here with the immutable name, the honorable name, Paul Robeson. When I look at people like Paul Robeson, for example, I cannot deny his hip-hopness, his defiance in the face of growing criticism toward his political views and allegiances, his skill as an orator, his intellect, his sports abilities, his activism and love for the truth. This man was indeed the hip-hop of his time, loved by the whole world and making a very good living as an artist, actor. Paul Robeson, clearly ahead of his time in thinking and in living, would still point out the injustices perpetrated by the United States government against, quote, the Negro, end quote. After speaking out publicly all over the world about the unjust conditions of Africans in America and expressing his respect for the people of the people of communist Russia, he was stripped of his passport for 8 years, an event which clearly dampened his ability to work and stifled his very successful performing career. Standing outside of the Supreme Court after winning his passport back, Mr. Robeson had this to say, quote, "The question raised by the State Department as to my political opinion bears the question of whether one who wants to sing and act can have, as a citizen, political opinion." This is, now imagine, this was back then, okay? This is when you sing, dance, you had no political opinion. He rose up, one of the first with one, and was ostracized, marginalized for it, actually criminalized for having a political opinion as an actor, singer, so on, sports athlete, so on. Let me read on. Well, let me just read it again. The question raised by the State Department as to my, this is Paul Robeson saying this, quote, "The question raised by the State Department as to my political opinion bears the question of whether one who wants to sing and act can have as a citizen, political opinion. And in attacking me, they suggested that when I was abroad, I spoke out against the injustices to the Negro people in the United States. I certainly did. And the Supreme Court Justice just ruled that in the segregation cases, that world opinion had a lot to do with that ruling. That our children, Negro children, can go to school like anybody else in the South. I'm very proud to have been part of directing world opinion to precisely that condition. The second, that I fight for this is the second point now, that I fight for the independence of the colonized people of Africa. The colored peoples of the World Assembly made it clear that nobody is going to tell them what to do. They're going to have their independence. I'm proud of that. The third, that I fight for peace and friendship with the Soviet Union. At Geneva, the President of the United States made it clear that nobody wants war with the Soviet Union. No American wants to fight them. And I presume certainly the Negro people of the United States don't want any war with them either. Nobody does, because we want peace and friendship in the world. End quote. Now, just to give you a little piece of this, we're reading this right now, and you see world events, right? Now, this is being read from Paul Robeson's times, 1930s, 1940s. This is being read during his times. And America's still beefing with Russia way back then. This has been an ongoing thing. But somehow, as we finish up our gospel, the sentiment that's being talked about here, same sentiment today. Don't nobody want war. Now, of course, I must admit, Russia's, doing its thing. And I all war is criminal, if you ask me. So I'm not going to say Russia's criminal. I'm not going to say Russia's justified. I'm not going to say anything pertaining to the war between Russia and Ukraine. But what I will say is all war is criminal. All war relies on deception, lies. They say the first casualty of war is the truth. So as hip-hoppers, we have to step back for a minute and really take a look at really take a look at politics and see as a nation, as a civilization, what we stand for, who we stand with. Now, of course, we stand in the United States. We stand with the United States. We live in the United States. But when you step back and consider yourself a nation, and you consider yourself a community of people that have interests, is war with Russia our interest, in our best interest? Is war with Russia in our best interest? Is war in anybody's, and I can't say anybody because some people benefit from war, but as far as hip hop is concerned, and I would even say some of the other urban cultures as well that we share the city with as well, I think people just want peace and prosperity. But there's these psychopaths that can't seem to live in the earth, can't seem to peacefully coexist with each other. And now we got to fight these wars. And so Paul Robeson, let me read it again. Quote, "No American wants to fight them," Soviet Union. "And I presume certainly the Negro people of the United States don't want any war with them either. Nobody does, because we want peace and friendship in the world." End quote. Let me read on. This attitude is basic to hip-hop's visionary forward thinkers throughout history. During the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, our parents expounded upon a lot of things concerning social conditions, social engineering, and their vision of a perfect society, many of whom were blacklisted and even wrongly imprisoned for doing so, and presently remain enslaved, some on death row, even as I write these words. For them, I can never abandon the dream. Others can, because they never really knew Kwame Ture personally or even spiritually. They never knew Dr. King or Malcolm X or Elijah Muhammad or Medgar Evers. They never met their children or donated anything toward their organizations or the continued legacies of these great ancestral leaders. They never even really studied them or their words to get at the true meaning of what was being said and expressed collectively. And I'll say also, but this is why the Temple of Hip Hop exists. This is another reason why the Temple of Hip Hop exists. I mean, I never met Malcolm X or Dr. King, but I met them spiritually. I actually met the children of most of them. Most of the children of both. And of course, Kwame Ture is my direct teacher as well. Shout out to the AAPRP, the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me read on. But wait a minute. I say that to say there's something that comes over you when you're really invested in a movement, or you really knew somebody who led a movement, or you was part of something that was bigger than yourself. And when you're part of that, there's something else that comes over you. There's a new character that comes on you. And this, of course, is the queen character, the king character, or in our situation, we would say the Negus Nagas character, the Kendake character. The character of the Kendake, the Queen Mother. The character of Negus Nagas, King of Kings. This is the character. And that character is a lineage. And that lineage doesn't really have a color, a race, an ethnicity. We just read in the last time we read track 4, that's all made up and arbitrary. Race, ethnicity, these things. But when you really get down to the reality of the human being, or as Dr. Cornel West would say, what does it mean to be human? You really don't have to ask no other question. Because when you answer that, you also answer a lot. You know what to do, you know what not to do. You know where to go, you know where not to go. You know how to treat other people. If you could just answer that one question, what does it mean to be human? I may have you all down in paleoanthropology, have you all out in psychology, definitely philosophy. What does it mean to be human? And so it's this attitude and knowing people, having being part of the lineage that even cares about rights. This is what this last passage is for. And we're laying out a certain character in this last passage that has nothing to do with race. It has to do with character. Listen. For most people, these ancestors are simply characters of the past. Now, these are people, and this is a double edge, a poetic reading here, because what I'm reading here is that most people never even study these ancestral leaders. They don't study them. They don't read up on their lives. They don't really get into them. Of course, we may read the autobiography of Malcolm X, Dr. King's life comes on TV every year, this kind of thing. There's a film on Harriet Tubman. You might get something as well on Frederick Douglass. So these are the lives we can really look into, and so on. And just these lives have inspired us to do great. Just imagine, just these lives. We don't even know, this is not even 1% of true black history. But just knowing these lives gives us a sense of vision, a sense of hope, a sense of faith and belief in oneself. But it's a character. And what I'm reading here is that for most people, these ancestors are simply characters of the past that bear little relevance in the fast-paced, technological, consumer-driven world of today. And as a result, the hard-fought freedoms and rights that our ancestors gave their lives to establish deteriorate for lack of knowledge as to the struggles to achieve such freedoms and rights and how to maintain them. See, when you do the work of the ancestors, you get the knowledge. When you do the work, when you're part of the legacy, not only do you get the freedom, but you also get the techniques for maintaining the freedom. When you're outside of your heritage, outside of your tradition, outside of your legacy, all you can do is objectively read about it. No empowerment, though. No real connection to the language of your ancestors that speak. It speaks to your soul. It doesn't speak English or French or Spanish or any of that, or Swahili, or, there's no word for this. This is character. This is being. And all those beings that express this character are speaking through that language. The very attitude and worldview of the free man and woman is what has been lost to us. And this is why many find the idea of hip-hop as a new civilization upon the earth so difficult to grasp. Now, mind you, this is 2009, and I was even writing even earlier than this. So the idea of hip-hop as a civilization was a weird concept back in the days. You heard me say this before as well. That's just an old line. Today, people are more apt to see this because of the work. This is why and how the police can treat us like anything. They know that we have no leadership, no army, or other protection. They know that we don't know our rights. They know that we don't know our rights, nor our true history, and that we are really unaware of our own mothers' and fathers' struggles and victories over such injustices. For if your father overcame the same injustices that you now face, shouldn't you be able to overcome them as well? Why are we still going through the same injustices that our parents and their parents and their parents' parents went through? At what point do we advance beyond the conditions of our parents and ancestors? At what point do we fulfill the dreams that our ancestors died for? Do we not realize that every generation has a duty to fulfill the dreams of the generation that has come before them? Do we not realize that it is our sacred duty to even advance upon the thinking of our parents and ancestors? But to do this, we have to know what was said and what was done. And when it was said, and when it was said, and how it was done. We have to study and hear from our revolutionary parents as well as from our conformist parents to get a complete picture as to how our heritage may be continued. We have to interpret, decipher, and decode the hidden meanings and descriptions of our comedian parents, for example, to get a real glimpse of their real space-time reality and how it may have affected us and the way we think or don't think today. Take comedian legend Dick Gregory, for example. In the 1970s, he stated, quote, "So many white folks in America want to know, what's wrong with them niggas?" Let me read this one more time. I'm sorry. This is Dick Gregory, a comedian, very famous, outspoken civil rights activist, and of course, legendary comedian. Quote, so many white folks in America want to know, what's wrong with them? Niggas must be crazy. Nah, baby, understand one thing. Niggas got more sense today than ever before in the history of America. And when niggas was basically crazy, that's when he thought we had good sense. Yeah, that's right. When he running around goosing me in the rump, rubbing my head, come here, Jabbo. Yeah, yes, sir, boss. When I was basically crazy. Now we talking about getting our thing together, getting our sanity together, baby. Once you get your mind together, baby, can't nobody deal with you. That's what this convention is all about, getting our mind together. When we leave here, it's going to be a different day, end quote. This is Dick Gregory at a convention. I think it was a 1971 convention. This is Dick Gregory. When we get our mind together, okay? This is back in the 60s. We still suffering the same thing. We still don't understand. We still don't get it. Somebody, KRS-ONE, has to come out and say the same thing again. What happened? Everything I'm preaching right now, everything I'm saying, everything I stand for already was stood for. Most of what I'm saying has already been said. Why then are we not acting on it? See, this is the inconsciousness we also talked about further up toward the front of the book in the health of awareness and wealth section, in the awareness section. This is that inconsciousness that we're talking about. You know what to do, you know what's right, but you just ain't doing it. You know you're supposed to lose 10 pounds. Why you not jogging? Come on now. You know you're supposed to put down the cake, eat the fried chicken. You know what it is, but you're just not doing it. That's the inconsciousness. But that's also why we got to get our mind together, not our bank account. Not our bank account. Not even education and knowledge. Your mind. The way you perceive. How you think. You know, these are the things. So this is Dick Gregory. Let's go forward, okay? Because the key part here is, well, we don't have to highlight it. I'll just read it again just one more time and jump back down to the end paragraph here. It says, but to do this, we have to know what was said and what was done, and when it was said and how it was done. This is how you transfer knowledge. This is how you transfer knowledge. Because if our kids, if we as adults, and then of course our children, but if we as adults don't know what was said, how it was said, when it was said, then we're sitting ducks. And guess what? That's what most people are today. They don't know what their ancestors fought and got victory over. They don't know. So they go through the same problem and fail. Because any problem you faced with, if somebody else already conquered it and then wrote down how they did it and you didn't get the message, you're going to go through the same thing. It's like running a stop sign. It's like seeing danger. Somebody put the danger sign there, but somebody took it away. Now you just run off the edge of the cliff. It's the same thing here. If you don't know that in the 1950s and 60s, really since the Civil War, I can't even say even before that, but let's just say at Reconstruction after the Civil War, 1865, just after that. Black people been trying to do their thing. Really, all people been trying to do their thing. I'm speaking black. That's my traditional heritage. That's my national heritage. I'm African American. I'm a black man in America. That's my national socio-political heritage. But you know I'm more expansive than that. And I hope you are as well. Whatever your ethnicity is, whatever your race is, be proud of that. Be proud of that. But only be proud of it to the extent that you're proud to be on a baseball team. Proud. I'll root for the Knicks because I'm from New York. Whatever it is for you. But that's about as far as race should go. That's about as far as ethnicity should go. Character is what should be leading the way in terms of identity and identifying other people. What is your character? What is the content of your character? This is truth. But how many of us really looking at truth? How many people can't even join this temple of hip hop call because the teacher of the call is a black man? How many people can't get on the call because the teacher of the call is KRS-ONE, a rapper? How many people can't get on the call because my voice tone doesn't agree with them? It doesn't soothe them. They can't learn from it. These little things, these little things. This is what I mean. Once you get your mind together, baby, can't nobody deal with you. That's what this convention is all about, getting our mind together. This is 1960s. We can't do no better than this. We, the children, the offspring of great civil rights leaders, human rights leaders. What are we doing today to continue that legacy? Really think about that. Here's paragraph 451. I'm continuing. I'm on page 802 of the Gospel of Hip Hop. One thing is for sure. Our parents saw the vision of a new nation. They were indeed divided over the issue of separation or integration, but the direction was clear. It was nation time. It was time to get your mind together. Whether that new nation was a transformed United States or an entirely new land somewhere in the world, the idea was never to stay in the same shape we found ourselves in post-slavery. In my view, if we are to truly achieve peace on earth and the end of racial hostility, we are going to have to give up the idea of separate races, which is the root cause of so many social ills. If we can teach our children to identify human beings by the content of their character and not by race or ethnic origin, we may one day look upon racism as we do upon cannibalism or human sacrifice today. However, we are not yet there. We are not there yet. As far as our parents were concerned, their debate focused upon the issues of their time, namely, do we integrate or separate? All of it was civil rights, but some of us wanted access to what the American mainstream offered, and others of us wanted to build our, quote, own thing, end quote. Those who wanted to build their own thing were more likely to frequent the Black Power movement, while those who wanted American mainstream access remained with the distinction civil rights. Hip-hop actually gets its start from both movements. However, the driving force and essence of hip-hop seems to be inspired by the Black Power movement of the 1960s and 1970s. Everything about early hip-hop points to the views of those whose voices were loud in the Black Power movement. Black Power was a phrase that denoted black self-governance. This powerful phrase, Black Power, was first introduced to the world by author Richard Wright as the title of a book that he had written after visiting Ghana in 1954. Now that's debatable because I was talking to Zizwe about that, and he didn't have knowledge on that as well. I got that knowledge from another book that I was reading, and I looked for that book and I can't find it, but I took the notes, as I was doing research, I took the notes. So I just wanted to just make a note of that. Obviously, author Richard Wright had a lot to do with the phrase Black Power, but this phrase here, paragraph 455, can also stand some further research. Let me read it to you again. Black Power was a phrase that denoted black self-governance. Now that's true. Here's the controversy. This powerful phrase, Black Power, was first introduced to the world by author Richard Wright as the title of a book that he had written after visiting Ghana in 1954. The prophet Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, popularized this phrase as a call for African independence worldwide. Ture and others of the 1950s and 1960s believed that white racist Americans would never be fair and just to the Africans in America, and so the only solution was organized revolution. The prophet Ture declared, quote, "Don't be afraid, don't be ashamed. We want black power, and we don't have to be ashamed of it. We have stayed here and we have begged the president. We begged the federal government. That's all we've been doing, begging, begging. It's time we stand up and take over. We have to do what every group in this country did. We got to take over the communities where we outnumber people so we could have decent jobs, so we could have decent houses, so we could have decent roads, so we could have decent schools, so we could have decent justice," end quote. This was and still is the real meaning of Black Power. It was about black African people governing themselves. This is what it was about. This is what it's still about. Now that phrase that I read here, the quote from Prophet Ture, Kwame Ture, you can find that on my video, Black, Black, Black. Go now, or not now, but after this lesson, review Black, 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 the video. Toward the end, you'll hear how he said it. I'll put it in the video. Of course, it's known. You could look online and get this as well, but you should hear how he said it. Get the culture on it. I just read it. Paragraph 458. I'm on page 804. Ture believed, like others, that black people could govern themselves, but that first they needed their own land away from white racism, injustice, and infiltration. In the early days of the Black Power movement, it was clear that black liberation began with black nationalism, black people governing their own independent nation, and that such a vision would come with a bloody price. As the prophet Malcolm X pointed out, quote, "Revolution is bloody. Revolution is hostile. Revolution knows no compromise. Revolution overturns and destroys everything that gets in its way. It's based on land. A revolutionary wants land so he can set up his own nation. These Negroes ain't asking for any nation. They're trying to crawl back on the plantation. When you want a nation, that's called nationalism," end quote. That was Malcolm X. And you can see he's critical of civil rights. However, even though our king, Dr. Martin Luther King, agreed with the basic social and political ideas of black power, black nationalism, he was against any revolutionary violence or black separation or separatism. Dr. King, in his early days, had a profound and unshaken faith in America as one racially unified nation that included the equality of the Negro. He advocated a bloodless revolution of integration. The king advised, quote, "In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force," end quote. I believe hip-hop is that soul force. Let's highlight paragraph 462. Highlight paragraph 462. Here it is. Hip hop is the realization and combination of all of our ancestors' dreams, hopes, strategies, and aspirations toward freedom, justice, and equality. We are the achievement of our ancestors. We are their hopes. We cannot divorce ourselves from the struggles of our parents, grandparents, and ancestors and expect to live in peace. They've spent their lives developing the little bits of advice we receive in fragments today. Think about that. I'm saying this one more time. They've spent their entire lives developing the little bits of advice we receive in fragments today. Highlight that whole piece. Continuing. While others are reading all sorts of scholarly and academically accepted writings on race relations by well-educated scholars on such matters, I prefer to read the prophet H. Rap Brown's 1969 book, Die Nigger Die, super historically, and really feel the space-time reality of my ancestors and their socio-political experiences. Now, when we say super historically, what are we talking about? We're talking about I could see my history in anybody's history. I'm not cutting off huge chunks of reality to explain myself according to how I was taught in school. Meaning that the history of plants is my history. The history of fish is my history, especially the fish that I eat. Okay, fish like salmon. How can you explain KRS without explaining the salmon? No, come on now. Now I need the whole history of salmon. I need the history of certain green vegetables and herbs and roots. All of this explains KRS-ONE. How about the whole history of Boogie Down Productions, just to explain me? Well, what historians do, and we went over this, is that historians cut off the omni event, the truth, what's really going on, human activity all over the earth going on at once. Historians cut off the effects of the event, and they cut off the causes of the event, so they could talk about one little piece of time. And in this particular situation, that's not, first of all, it's not even true. But in this situation, we're talking about looking at history super historically, which means we don't have to cut off causes and cut off effects. We don't have to just say, I'm reading this book and that's what I'm doing. The history of this is that I'm reading a book. I'm reading the Gospel of Hip Hop, and that's it. That's how history is taught. This is all I'm doing. But the history of the light is ignored. The history of this painting here, this picture, you can't see it really, but the history of the painting is ignored. Everything. How this book even got to me? Gospel of Hip Hop. How did it ignored? We're just cutting all that off so that we could just get right here. Now, I'm giving you that long explanation because now let's look at this super historically, meaning through H. Rap Brown, we can see our history. Not reading all this scholarly, Harvard, Yale, and big up to Harvard and Yale too, by the way, but not all that. Let's just get real, let's get hip hop with this. And the souls, you can super historically see this event I'm about to read. Okay, this didn't happen to you. This ain't your history, supposedly. But it is in hip-hop. In character, it is. Brown writes and advises, quote, "We must learn that black is not a color, but the way you think. If we are to succeed in the struggle, we must eliminate the significance we have assigned to color in our community." This is a Black Panther talking, okay? Among black people, color can have no value, no significance. Commitment will determine the value of individuals. Again, commitment will determine the value of individuals. End quote. And this is not to say that H. Rap Brown was insinuating the abandonment of race. Not at all. However, his approach to race, especially to the black race, is interesting to study because his description of his time is strikingly similar to the conditions in our time, at least for those who claim hip-hop as their lifestyle and culture. He writes, quote, you grow up in black America, and it's like living in a pressure cooker. Babies become men without going through childhood. And when you become a man, you got nothing to look forward to and nothing to look back on. So what do you make it on? The wine bottle, the reefer, or Jesus? A taste of grape, the weed, or the cross? These are our painkillers. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? How many people right now did I just sum up? He just said, a taste of grape, the weed, or the cross. These are our painkillers. I knew dudes who were old men by the time they were 7. Look at it. I knew dudes who were old men by the time they were 7. That's the age when little white kids are dreaming about fairy princesses and Cinderella and playing in three houses and wondering whether they want 2 cars or 4 cars when they grow up. We didn't have time for all that. Didn't even have time for a childhood. If you acted like a child, you didn't survive, and that's all there was to it. End quote. If you acted like a child, you didn't survive. See, these little sentences tell you what the hood was like. And some people will still never get it. This is written to remind us where we came from. Brown continues, quote, white folks get all righteous and wonder why black people steal and gamble. Same reason white folks do. We need money because society says you must have it to keep from starving. If you got it, you eat. If you don't, tough. But white people are able to make their stealing and gambling legitimate. White man will sell you a $20 suit for $50 and call it good business. What he actually did was steal $30. White man will buy a watch for $5, sell it for $49.95 and call the difference profit. Profit is a nice word for stealing, which the society has legitimized. Catholics go to church every week and gamble, but they call it bingo. The Pope blesses them, so it's all right. The state of Nevada is built on a stack of cards and a roulette wheel, but that's okay, because it's white folks that passed the law saying it was okay. But you let us get over in the corner. You let us get over in the corner of an alley with some dice. Like you let us get over in the corner in the alley with some dice and try to make a little profit. And here comes the police, the judge, the jailer, and the sociology student. We get thrown into jail for gambling or stealing. White folks go to Congress for stealing, and they call that democracy. See, this is what it is. Okay, America is a country that makes you want things, but doesn't give you the means to get those things. End quote. This is H. Rap Brown, by the way. Notice the word rap in there as well. The book is Die Nigger Die by H. Rap Brown, and we quoted it a few times in the Gospel of Hip Hop. It is a classic. But I'm putting this piece here because just in this little passage, so much is being taught. So much is being taught. And if you're interested in justice and you're interested in truth, come on, you can't pass this up. You know this is the truth. You know this is what's going on today. This is the 1960s. In fact, 1969. This is still going on now. 2023. This is going on right now. We can't do no better than this. This is why the Temple of Hip Hop exists. This is why the Temple of Hip Hop exists. Because we got to do better than this. This, like we said, racism and all of that has to become like cannibalism. Has to become like something that we laugh at today, like, oh my God, it's so crazy. But right now, racism, and I would like to add here, stealing, robbery, stealing is legitimized in society because that's how the society was created. And what H. Rap Brown, of course, he's talking in his talk, he's talking in his way, but we know that this is still the truth. He's talking about capitalism. And we know this is the truth. But even if you know it's the truth, you still got to abide by that system or you don't eat. See, once you know this, you start to see what Black Power is really all about. It's about sovereignty. Is there another way to live? Can we live without money? I mean, that's probably blowing people's mind. Like, how are you supposed to live without money? Easy. Live without it. Why money, the system of money and currency and banking and all of economics is based on faith. Every economist know that. Everybody know that. It's based on faith. The whole system is based on faith and belief. And how do you become to believe? They terrorize you into believing. The man with the gun kills your kid, kills your moms, kills your father. You go into depression. You go into state of shock. And multiply that by 300 million people. And you got a nation. At least you got this one. Kept together by fear. Kept together by ignorance, deception. Keep the ignorant ignorant. Keep deceiving them so we could use them. And you want to hear something crazier than this? People go along with it. Wait a minute, did you hear what I just said? People go along with this because it's all they know. It's really child abuse, really. From the time you enter into the school system, you're given the answer to all your questions. You don't even ask a question. And if you do ask questions, they're never answered. You go to school to get indoctrinated. And you're told what reality is as opposed to you finding out for yourself or somebody who really loves you and cares about you telling you what the real is. No, you got to come to a temple of hip hop now to find out what the real is. You got to go to college or meet a real teacher that's willing to have patience with you and take time with you and walk you through reality. Because the fantasy that we're living today, you can clearly see, like, this is not an opinion. Go on, not online, just watch CNN. First of all, and not to call out CNN, watch any news program in that sense. First of all, we're not getting news anymore. You know that. And we know that, but we still tune in. This is the issue. This is the issue, and I'm talking because I do it too. That's how I know. Okay? I know they bullshit. But I still tune in. Let me hear the latest bullshit. And you still tuning in. It's a trap. We got to create an entirely different reality. Step out of that into another one. But you got to be willing to see something different. And that's the point. This is the point, to getting our mind together, baby. This is the whole point. You got to be able to see something different. And if you can't see it, then hopefully you're satisfied in the reality you're in. Because some people are and doing very well in the reality they're in. But those of us that are hip hop, we're doing okay, but not really. Not as a nation. Just because 1 or 2 or 3, just because 100 of us may be rich or popular, That's good for the 100. But if you're talking about building a nation, the nation has to be rich. The nation has to be healthy. The nation has to have a good reputation and be able to trade and have something to trade. It's gross domestic product. The nation has to have that. So I'm mentioning all of this because I just read this passage from H. Rap Brown, and it's a true passage. So much is being said in terms of how we grow up even, or how black folk grew up, but I can apply this to a lot of people. If you're of this character, if you're of this, white folk grew up like this, no time for childhood. You went from 1 and then you woke up, you was 21. Who don't go through that? A lot of people go through that. I'm only speaking from my particular cultural heritage. But you can see this is a universal message if you're of this character. This is what you go through. This is what's expected. Can you see something different? Let's continue. So, sounds familiar? This is hip-hop's American history. This is hip-hop's American history. This is what every hip-hop American child should know. And again, our children should be exposed to these ideas just as historian Howard Zinn suggests. As scholars, we must search out, study, and teach a wide range of underground views in order to get at the truth regarding what our hip-hop ancestry was actually saying. Many things could not be spoken publicly and or directly. All of our elders were correct in their approaches towards solid solutions for our people. However, they could not see what we, their children, were to find out in the years to come. What was a secret to them in the 1960s became common knowledge to us in the 1980s. What they were killed for, we now do openly and frequently. Even you, my future, shall learn of things about hip-hop today that we, your past, did not know in our time. That is just prophecy right there. In my time, this is the past, we have different tools and, in my time, we have different tools and new evidence for investigation of a history that our parents simply did not have. For example, we now know that J. Edgar Hoover, head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, organized a counterintelligence program from 1956 to 1971 against those civil rights leaders and black nationalist groups that he felt were political dissidents or communists. We now know that the FBI, under the direction of J. Edgar Hoover, used blackmail, illegal drugs, informants, false propaganda, wiretapping, and even spiritual warfare strategies like astrology and mysticism to, quote, prevent the rise of a black messiah, end quote. They had thought the black messiah was already a grown man, but in fact the black messiah was still a young infant, hidden randomly amongst the people themselves. They, the FBI, felt that a black messiah was about to rise, and that such a messiah would unify and electrify the black nationalist movement. And even though they felt that the prophet Malcolm X was most likely that messiah, it was the prophet Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, that they really had their eye upon. He, Kwame Ture, was the one who influenced Dr. King to begin using the term black when referring to African Americans as opposed to Negro. Stokely Carmichael argued for black African independence, while the King argued for Negro integration into the American mainstream. Torre would say, quote, we gotta build so much strength in the building of our community that if they come to get one person, they're gonna have to mess with us all, end quote. Our king, however, would argue, quote, when a people are mired in oppression, they realize deliverance only when they have accumulated enough power to enforce change. The powerful never lose opportunities, they remain available to them. The powerless, on the other hand, never experience opportunity. It is always arriving at a later time. This is what's underlined from Dr. King. The needlesome task of Negroes today is to discover how to organize our strength into compelling power so that government cannot elude our demands. We must develop from strength a situation in which the government finds it wise and prudent to collaborate with us. What a brilliant strategy. That's what's going on right now. Think about that. Let me hit it again. This is Dr. King. The nettlesome task of Negroes today is to discover how to organize our strength into compelling power. Our strength into compelling power. To compel. Okay, do you get this? So that government cannot elude our demands if we're compelling them. This is not fight. This is not Malcolm. This is not Kwame. This is not that. This is subtle. Come on over here. Come on over here. Like that. This is Dr. King. Okay? So he says, organize our strength into compelling power so that government cannot elude our demands. We must develop from strength a situation in which the government finds it wise and prudent to collaborate with us. That's hip hop. Today. That's hip hop today. It is wise for the government to collaborate with hip hop. It's wise. Fighting against criminalizing the culture. This ain't doing good for nobody, okay? But uniting with hip hop? When governments around the world begin to see and say, wait a minute. It's better we unite with this group. We both gonna win now. And the king has already prophesied. This is already a strategy that we should be paying attention to. Let me look over here. This is already a strategy that we should be paying attention to. Already. Compel governments to collaborate with you. But Malcolm X would add, quote, the best way to get rid of segregation, he said, the best way to get rid of segregation? The white man is more afraid of separation than he is of integration. Separation means that he puts you away from him, but not far enough for you to be out of his jurisdiction. Separation means you're gone. I'm sorry, wait a minute, let me read that again. Segregation means that he puts you away from him, but not far enough for you to be out of his jurisdiction. Separation means you're gone, and the white man will integrate faster than he'll let you separate, end quote. And we got to put that to the test, don't we? As hip-hoppers, we absorbed all of it. Yes, we were clearly American citizens and proud of the heritage laid down by our elders and ancestors. However, America would still never treat black and brown people as equals with whites, and this injustice caused us, even whites, to develop alternative ways to survive within a society that basically ignored the black and brown experience. These experiences helped to cause the cultural beginnings of hip-hop. For even though black power was clearly about black self-governance, such governance clearly included the liberation of all people struggling to survive. As revolutionary Kathleen Cleaver has stated, quote, everyone knows that all the people don't have liberties, all the people don't have freedoms, all the people don't have justice, and all the people don't have power. So that means none of us do. Take this country and change it. Turn it upside down and put the last first and the first last. Not just for black people, but for all people. end quote. The Black Panther Party, clearly an organization set up for the protection and liberation of black people, headed by Huey P. Newton, laid out a black agenda that was to lead to the creation of a black nation state. Newton pointed out that, quote, the Black Panther Party calls for freedom and the power to determine our own destiny. The Black Panther Party calls for full employment for all our people. The Black Panther Party calls for an end to the capitalistic exploitation of our community. The Black Panther Party calls for decent housing for all people. Let's get this. The Black Panther Party calls for decent housing for all people. The Black Panther Party calls for an educational system that will tell the U.S. the truth, will tell us. You know what? Oh, that's an editor's note. Hold up, I gotta get a pen. That is an error. All right, you know what? I'm gonna write that down. Let me just make a note of that real quick. Let's make a note of this. I just saw this now. This is an editor's error because I didn't write it like this. Look at this. The Black Panther Party calls for an educational system that will tell U.S. the true facts about this decadent society. It's not tell U.S. It's tell us the true facts about this decadent society. But here it says U.S. and that has to change. That has to change. Matter of fact, I'm going to put a little thing here. I'll get a pen. Yeah, I'm just in a position right here. I got to go back. But you mark it as an error. I'm on paragraph 485. The Black Panther Party agenda would continue with the demand for black men, in particular, to be exempt from military service, the immediate end to police brutality, freedom for all black men held in federal, state, and county and city prisons and jails. All black people, when brought to court to be tried by a jury of their peer group or people from their black community. And lastly, land. Land. And although the Black Panther Party's agenda was clearly about the upliftment of black people, their 10-point agenda dealt with the basic humanity, dignity, and quality of life for anyone faced with institutionalized injustice. Everyone said it in their own way, in their own words, and from their own intellectual positions, but the general theme of black power was always about the building of a new nation, a new civilization. Whether it was the rebuilding of America as that new nation or the establishment of a new African black nation, the goal was clear. It was nation time. As aide to Dr. King, Reverend Jesse Jackson would say in 1972 at the National Black Convention in Gary, Indiana, echoing the words of poet Leroy Jones, aka Amiri Baraka, it's nation time. This is what Amiri Baraka, and look at this. I mean, do I have to stop here with Amiri Baraka? Because his two sons, okay, Ross Baraka, mayor of Newark, New Jersey, and Amiri Baraka Jr., the mayor's chief of staff, is the ones that opened the way for the Temple of Hip Hop to appear at 55 Ludlow Street, right there in Newark, New Jersey. This was written long before we met. But we met already. We had already met. As aide to Dr. King, Reverend Jesse Jackson would say in 1972 at the National Black Convention in Gary, Indiana, echoing the words of poet Leroy Jones, a.k.a. Amiri Baraka, he said, back in 1972, it's nation time. And in 2023, 51 years later, his sons would declare hip-hop that nation in Newark, New Jersey. You don't see what's going on here. You know, I'm making this up, right? Okay, let's continue. It's nation time. Jesse Jackson would say, "What time is it?" And the crowd would say, "It's nation time." And Jackson would continue, "When we come together, what time is it? It's nation time. When we respect each other, what time is it? It's nation time. When we get our self-confidence, what time is it? It's nation time. From when we form our own political party, what time is it? It's nation time." You know what? Let me get a pen. There, give me that pen right here, real quick. This is crazy because I want to go back and let me just make this note here real quick. Remember to this thing that says U.S. in paragraph 484 on page 809. That's an error. I want to go back to this real quick. I want you to see this, okay? I want you to see this because Reverend Jesse Jackson laid out what nation time means, what has to happen in order for the nation to actually go down. And It's Nation Time is obviously a poem by Leroy Jones, aka Amiri Baraka. So Jesse Jackson would say, "What time is it?" And the crowd would say, "It's nation time." And Jackson would continue, "When we come together," this is the first one, "when we come together, what time is it? It's nation time." Unity, first thing. When we come together, what time is it? Nation time. This is not, when we bicker amongst each other, when we compete with each other, when we slander one another, when we murder, rob, steal, and kill one another. It's nation time? No, this is the antithesis of that. This is the complete opposite. Nation time is when we come together. Here's the second one. And Jackson would continue. When we respect each other, what time is it? When we respect each other, first, let's come together. When we come together, let's respect one another. Because we came together. Anybody in this group deserves respect because this group is building a nation. This group already sees the vision. We know we ain't robbing, shooting, and stealing, and killing with each other. If you got to do that, that's on you, but you ain't with this group. This group understands the importance of being harmless. This group understands the importance of cooperation over competition. This group wants its neighbor to have peace and prosperity. That's what this group is about. We respect one another. We respect one another. If we just had that, organization could come up. Matter of fact, let me read. When we respect one another, what time is it? It's nation time. When we get our self-confidence, what time is it? It's nation time. How do you get self-confidence? By being respected. First of all, you get self-confidence by being educated. Get some knowledge, get some education, you get some self-confidence. But mastering a skill and having other people say to you, "That was dope. Thank you for that." Or, whatever compliment or response, whatever positive response you can get raises your self-esteem, raises your self-confidence. A job well done. Not just somebody saying that to you, the compliment, but you knowing to yourself, job well done, gives you self-confidence. And like I said, being educated gives you self-confidence as well. These things will also bring respect. It's a circular thing. When we get our self-confidence, what time is it? It's nation time. When we form our own political party, what time is it? It's nation time. When we form our own political party, we didn't get there yet. But like I said it a couple of calls back. I'll say it here again, just on this note. You know, in 2023, I changed my views on voting. And I changed them for two reasons, and I'll say it here again. For many years, I've been a staunch critic, not against voting, but I'm more toward voter education than voter registration. I think an uninformed voter is just a sitting duck. They're just going to take your power and use it really against you. In addition to that, the voting process is so corrupt and evil. Why would you even want to be part of something like that? Okay. Now, these are just my heartfelt convictions. Okay. That's what I feel and have felt for many years. The system's corrupt. We all know it is. The system's broken. I'm talking about the voting system. Broken, corrupt, too much money going in. You could buy votes. You could twist things around. The whole government can be bought. I mean, all of that. And we know that to be the truth. I'm not criticizing. I'm not saying anything that nobody don't already know. So why willingly participate in a corrupt system? I can't see no logic to it. But I began to change my view. And here's why. One is that too many of my friends, when I was young, okay, when I was younger, I should say, when I was younger, it was cool to say, I ain't voting. I don't need to vote. Because I didn't know any politicians. I didn't know anybody. Period. And so it's easy to say, no, I'm not going to vote because none of it matters to me. I'm in my own world. I'm in hip hop. So all that voting, that's y'all go ahead. And every 4 years, y'all getting duped. But in the last 10 years, a lot of my friends, not a lot, but a few of my friends that I've known for a few years, got a chance to look at their character too, got a chance to take a look. These dudes won offices. You know, like I'm just saying, like in the last 10 years, really the last 20, it really started when we took hip hop to the United Nations and I really got to see politics for real. And it's nothing like what comes on the TV. I was duped by the TV, which made me not want to vote, which made me not want to be a part of the political process. It's all crazy, this kind of thing. I'm duped by the TV and newspaper at the time. You remember the newspaper? I'm going by what the news is saying. I'm going by what the TV is saying. I'm going by this. And then all of a sudden, I found myself inside. I'm standing at the United Nations, and I'm seeing how things tick. And I'm saying, wait a minute. These people ain't smarter than me. They're not smarter than you. They just have access. How do you get access? Okay, nothing to do with your education, nothing to do with your character, nothing to do with nothing. It has to do with loyalty. Loyalty. You see it playing out all through politics right now, but that's what it's really about. Your clique, your group, this kind of thing. Okay? Now that's not all of politics, but this is what I saw. This is the big piece that I got to see. And I said, you know what I started to say back in the days, 20 some odd years ago? I said, you know, one day, all of this is going to change. I said in the song, Oh Yeah, I said, oh yeah, what you say when you see the devil down? Oh yeah, what you say when you take the devil's crown? Oh yeah, stay alive. All things will change around. Oh yeah, what? Oh yeah. That was a prayer about today. And it's like all things will change around. Stay alive. All things will change around. Oh, yeah. And we knew that a future president a future senator, a future governor was in the 80s listening to KRS or Public Enemy or Poor Righteous Teachers or whoever, or NWA and all of it. All of hip hop was being listened to by the same Republicans and Democrats that are in office today. We knew this. We had no articulation. We couldn't say, oh, they're going to do this and they're going to do that. Nobody knew that. But we knew the condition was going to be like this. And everyone didn't know that. Only a few of us did. Those of us who were thinking in that direction. We knew it. I knew it, and I said it. And I said it on a bunch of records. I wrote about it. I prepared our people for it. But what happened? It happened. And when it happened, now I'm sitting back and I'm saying, damn, so many of my friends are winning offices. Like, forget what I think about voting. Lords of the Underground is a councilman, okay? Shout out to Debris Kelly. Do it all. MC Do It All. No, that's a councilman. Say his name with respect now. Come on. That's the councilman. Honorable. The Honorable Dupree Kelly. Come on now. So what I'm supposed to do? Me and Lords of the Underground, my crew, from back in first of all, I like their lyrics. Okay? Go back, listen to the record. Okay? They talking straight hip-hop. When they had their chance, they said we're going to call ourselves Lords of the Underground. That means we never going to get anything. Okay? We already understand this. And what we going to rap? We're going to rap hip-hop. Go back and listen to the record. Number one chief rocker, number one chief rocker. Go back, listen to the lyric. Dude was talking that crazy, okay? Now look. Now look. Now look. So now I look at my man Dupree Kelly, who got in position based on votes. And I'm saying, you know what? That national vote thing may be clouding my mind. Local politics? Hold up. We might be able to save our people with this. We might be able to lift our communities up with this. I'm focused on the presidency. Forget that. Let's focus on the councilman. Let's focus on who gets voted in sheriff and judge and district attorney and these kinds of positions. Can we influence that? Well, the answer seems to be yes. It's nation time. And a lot of the people who were in the clubs are now sitting in benches on courts. A lot of them dudes that was watching Yo MTV Raps and walking around their house in their slippers trying to be Run DMC are now working at NASA, the White House, the Supreme Court. Okay, let's just keep it real. So I give you this explanation. I gave this before, but we're recording, so I'm putting this down. I had to change my view on voting. I still have the same convictions about the system itself. But guess what? So does everybody else. That's the sick part to it. It's like the more I go into politics and say, man, this is fucked up. Y'all know it. And you got, yeah, we do. So what are you going to say? Like, yeah, okay. Like we all know, right? This whole shit's fucked up. The whole shit's crazy. But it's the only system you got to get anything done. So you got to drudge through the bull and the mud and the dirt and the vomit to get to what you got to get done. And some don't make it. Scandals come up. People go to jail. All types of craziness happens in the political world. But this is also why religion was supposed to go hand in hand with politics. And what's happening is that people have lost faith in religion because of religion. People have lost faith in religion. And science don't cut it. And politics don't cut it. And banking don't cut it. None of this talks to the soul. And right now, while we are dealing with mental health, a mental health epidemic in the United States, It's time for your spirit to come alive again. That's the only solution to mental health, is spiritual knowledge. It's the only solution. Other solution is drugs, maybe hypnotism, these kinds of things could also deal with mental health. But if you want to deal with mental health on a mass level, you got to bring back the 10 Commandments, G. You got to respect prayer. You got to respect concepts like mercy, forgiveness, charity, love. You got to speak that more. You got to preach that more. And it's sad because the major religions of the world have let the people down. It's another reason why the Temple of Hip Hop exists. But they let the people down. And again, I'm not criticizing. I'm not saying anything that anybody don't already know. But we still go into these churches. We still go into temples, synagogues, mosques, still there, coming out more evil than we went in, more hateful. Come on now. Come on now. You know what I'm saying is the truth. So if you know what I'm saying is the truth, let us react to that. Let us react to the truth and say we're not going to act like that. We're not going to be like this. We're going to take words like I can't, I don't, and I hate out my mouth. And we're going to say I will, I perceive, I can, and I love. We're going to talk that. Those that want to talk I can, I do, I believe, I will, those people, that's hip-hopia. That's where we going. The rest of these people that want to talk hate, I can't, I don't, I won't, what can you do? You live your life, G. Live your life. We've been preaching this now for over 30 years, and we are recipients of our own teachings. Others are recipients of their teachings. Good luck to us all. But I bring you here. I bring you here because when it's nation time, this is the key piece. When it's nation time, your personal views might have to get put aside. I told you it was 2 reasons why I changed my views on voting. 1, all my friends became political. Not all. A lot of them became political. And because of friendship, I'm going to support them no matter what. I know these dudes. So I can't be around my people. That's like people being around me saying they don't like hip-hop. And there's a lot to not like about hip-hop, especially that radio bullshit. If you listen to that all day, like I'm watching CNN all day and saying, oh, that's politics. Others listening to the radio and saying, this is hip-hop. And you getting caught up in that. If that's what you listening to, then I can see. There's a lot of bullshit going on. You could be like, man, hip-hop ain't nothing. I can see that. But if you can catch the revelation, it's like, then you run up on KRS-ONE. And you say, hip-hop ain't what you hear on the radio. Let me take you to one of my concerts so you can really see what it is. And you go through that process. And you be like, oh, no, I get it now. Well, I'm kind of in that same position where certain politicians and so on, and even scholars, legal scholars, I'm talking to all kinds of people. I talk to legal scholars, I talk to professors, I talk to political analysts, some of I'm not going to drop any names, but, within my day, I can get on the phone with any number of professors or lawyers or whatever, and conversations can come up, about this and that. And you notice, we're all kind of dodging each other, in this way. And it's friction too sometimes, you want to do something and the attorney says you can't because of some law, or you want to go somewhere and, it's a revelation. It's a revelatory life, I should say. But you're making me think about other things. Let me go back to the point. The point is, I changed my views on voting because a lot of my people are high level political officials, including police officers as well. Um, know some really good police officers. Tell you like it is, know what it is. These dudes is cops. How do you become a cop? Why do you even want to do that? You'd be amazed at the conversations. You'd be amazed at some of the conversations. But this is the world I'm in at 60, okay, or 57 actually. But this is the world that I'm in. I've moved myself into a position in society where I am speaking to chief of police, I am speaking to chief of fire, medical emergency people, doctors, lawyers of various forms of law, architects, engineers. We're building a city. People are coming up with ideas, bringing them to us, this kind of thing. So it's like your view changes. It matures, I should say. Not change, because I still have the same views, but I can see a broader view. This idea, I stopped here for a minute because I wanted to talk about this one piece about when we form our own political party. That's the second piece, where I think voting might be to our advantage. Because imagine a hip-hop vote. Regardless of what I think about voting, and regardless of how corrupt the system actually is, what if there was 1 million hip-hop votes? And every year, these politicians, every 2 years and 2 and 4 years, these politicians had to come to the hip-hop community to garner those 1 million votes. We can make a lot of things change with those 1 million votes. We can make a lot of things change. What's going on now is that votes are going either to the Democratic Party or to the Republican Party, and they're taking the power and doing what they need to do for their organization, not even for their constituents, but for their organization. Hip-hop shouldn't even be part of that. We should just enter the voting environment as hip-hop, call ourselves the house party. Shout out to Kid and Play. Call ourselves the house party. And just have 1 million votes. That's it. That may not get you anywhere. The country is 74, not 74, that's half, 150 million votes. People got to vote. The last vote, Biden and Trump, was 150 million people voting. So imagine if we just started out with 1 million of those votes. We one of the people that you got to come to garner these 1 million votes. You're going to tell us what we need to hear to get our 1 million votes. I think this might be a big deal for hip-hop. And so my personal opinion about this, I have to mature from that, put that to the side. I still have the opinion. I still have the opinion. But I have a broader view of it. And I think hip-hoppers can win, actually, if we united a vote. If we united around our issues. Here's what we want. And we'll vote for whoever's going to help us get this. This is the game. And if we, of course, anything hip-hop touches, you know what happens, okay? We're unstoppable. So imagine us in the voting process. Imagine that. How we could really change things. And at the least, expose the hypocrisy. Because if you got 2 million hip-hoppers voting, you could count on 2 million votes from hip-hoppers. I just raised it up. You could count on 2 million votes from hip-hop. And imagine on your campaign trail, you had to come around to the hood. Because we don't want you downtown. You coming to the hood. Okay? You can bring as much security as you want, but you coming to the hood. Okay? And this is where you're going to talk. And you're going to talk to our people. And you're going to tell them what they need. And if you don't speak the way we need you to speak, you don't get those 2 million votes. And these people may front for a minute until we come up with our own candidate. And then they say, oh, wait. Right. But once you have those 2 million votes or million votes or any amount really, once you at the table, it's a done deal. It's a done deal. So these are my views, and I should stop right there on when we form our own political party. This is Jesse Jackson talking in 1972. When we form our own political party, what time is it? It's nation time. End quote. Even the mayor of Gary, Indiana, Richard Hatcher, at the same convention in 1972 would say, quote, I believe that the 70s will be the decade of an independent black political thrust. He didn't know he was talking about hip hop because nothing else happened. He said in 72, quote, I believe that the 70s will be the decade of an independent black political thrust. How should we respond? This is him talking now. This is the mayor of Gary, Indiana in 1972 talking, okay? Now look at this. Independent black political thrust. That's hip hop. Nothing else in the 70s matched that. Independent is the key word. Independent black political thrust of the 70s. A decade of it. The whole 70s, as far as the streets were concerned, was hip-hop. The whole thing. That and or disco. But disco was some high-end, go to the club. It wasn't streets. It was not the streets. Disco was its own thing. And so was rock, and so was reggae, and so was everything else. Hip-hop was its own thing. And the children of these people, Jesse Jackson, Kwame Ture, Dr. King, these are the people who would get together with some Puerto Ricans and some Jamaicans, and they would go and start this independent black political thrust. The mayor continues, how should we respond? Now, this is will we walk in unity or disperse in 1,000 different directions? What was the first thing Jesse Jackson said? Jesse Jackson said, when we come together, the mayor here is saying, will we walk in unity or disperse in 1,000 different directions? Will we stand for principles or settle for a mess of pottage? Will we maintain our integrity or will we succumb to the man's temptations? Will we act like free black men or like timid, shivering chattel? End quote. And look at what was said here. Unity, principles, integrity, free black man. Unity, principles, integrity, free black man. As a collective strategy toward nation building, our elders laid out the groundwork for how such a nation could be organized. Our king advocated organization, peace, discipline, black self-esteem, financial independence, and justice. Kathleen Cleaver advocated liberty, freedom, power, and justice. Malcolm X advocated self-defense, independence, self-worth, and justice. Kwame Ture advocated self-governance, organization, revolution, and justice. The Black Panther Party advocated freedom, self-determination, employment, fair trade, decent housing, and justice. Jesse Jackson advocated unity, respect, self-confidence, political activism, and justice. Mayor Hatcher saw independence and advocated unity, principles, integrity, courage. And of course, he too stood for justice. These are just some of the most important guidelines in the actual building of the nation that our elders and prophets of the Black Power movement saw. Unfortunately, in my time, African Americans have not yet lived up to such a vision of independence. So where and what is the African American agenda and vision? We need unity, and we need it now. However, what the so-called African American community cannot seem to achieve for themselves, ourselves, hip-hop can and will achieve for itself. I believe that hip-hop has the ability to provide the cultural structure necessary for our next level of freedom. So I say again, if we don't know to ourselves who we are, where we have come from, where we are going, and how we are going to get there, then we are not a group at all. We are a mass of individuals identified exclusively by the fact that we all have no direction and no vision. This is what look, this is what's holding us back right now. No vision and no direction. This is it. This is the point. And that's why the Temple of Hip Hop exists. We exist as vision. That's why we read in this gospel, so we can get clear with the vision. With the vision. We, at this level of experience, are indeed a subservient people, slaves, living at the expense and permission of those who have a direction and a vision for themselves. It is not that they enslaved us. It is more the fact that we reduce ourselves to slaves by betraying our own principles as well as one another. Let's go ahead and write that. I need that right there. This is, get this right here. Go ahead and get this. I'm getting this right here. I'm going to read it to you one more time. We, at this level of existence, are indeed a subservient people, slaves, living at the expense and permission of those who have a direction and a vision for themselves. It is not that they enslaved us. It is more the fact that we reduce ourselves to slaves by betraying our own principles as well as one another. That's what makes you a slave. That's what continued slavery for 300 years. Think about that. How can you have a whole group of people in slavery for 300 years and they not go along with it too? True freedom seems to not only be about breaking the chains from one's hands, feet, and mind. True freedom seems to also be spiritual. It seems to be about self-creation and self-governance. Beyond the weak and temporal distinctions that are formed by physical senses, hip-hop as a collective consciousness has already formed stronger similarities amongst all the races of the world by allowing the inner and more permanent reality of human expression to be the judge of identity and value amongst human beings. It is clear to all thinking hip-hoppers that race hatred and ethnic prejudice must be removed from the minds of children if, as adults, they are to live together in peace and domestic tranquility. I believe that hip-hop is the very environment to teach such a perception. The ability to create and then govern oneself seems to be the continuation of our struggle toward freedom. For us, self-creation is the ultimate state of freedom, and we have another opportunity with our hip-hop activity in the world to recreate ourselves into a new global civilization. This would not only be evidence of our freedom today, but it would also advance our political maturity, because this would not be the first time that Africans in America have set up an alternative self-governing community in the world. Other attempts at such a vision didn't always seem to end up the way everyone envisioned. And as African Americans, we must ask ourselves, why? And notice I said here, as African Americans, we must ask ourselves why. That's specific. Why would we, in particular, went to go start another nation, which I'm going to read about here. Why we in particular couldn't get that done back in the 1800s. Why? Character. So, let me read paragraph 511 one more time. I'm on page 813. Other attempts at such a vision didn't always seem to end up the way everyone envisioned, and as African Americans, we must ask ourselves why. What can we learn from the Africans who migrated north to Nova Scotia, Canada, 1782 to 1785, after fighting alongside the British in the American Revolution? Will we ever achieve another Africville again? Liberia was another place set up on the continent of Africa by the American Colonization Society, ACS, for newly freed and free African Americans in 1821. What can we learn here? After the American Revolution, free and enslaved Africans in America faced continued racism and inequality. Unlike today, the assimilation of free Africans in America into the white American society was out of the question. Therefore, the only solution at the time was the complete separation of black Africans and white Americans, or white Europeans. This led to the concept of Africans in America returning to Africa. In 1815, an African American Quaker, did you hear me? In 1815, an African American Quaker and maritime entrepreneur, Paul Cuffey, financed and captained a voyage to Sierra Leone in Africa, where he helped a group of Africans living in America to establish themselves there. Other Africans would continue to migrate north into Nova Scotia, Canada, and from Nova Scotia travel to Sierra Leone and other parts of Africa. Paul Cuffey believed that Africans in America could rise to be a people in Africa rather than in America with its system of slavery and legal limits on African freedom. Cuffey envisioned an African trade network organized by westernized Africans who would return to Africa to help build it up. Inspired by Mr. Cuffey's vision, sympathetic white separatists formed the American Colonization Society to repatriate those Africans living in the United States who would volunteer to settle in Africa. To form a place for Africans in America to return to Africa, the American Colonization Society sent Dr. Eli Ayres, A-Y-R-E-S, aided by U.S. Naval Officer Lieutenant Robert F. Stockton, to purchase land along the coast of Africa. Somehow, Lieutenant Stockton led the negotiations with leaders of the Dey and Bassa tribes who lived in the area of Cape Mesurado. The Dey, D-E-A, and Bassa, B-A-S-S-A tribes, people, were reluctant to surrender their lands to Stockton. So at gunpoint, Stockton forcibly persuaded the natives to accept trade goods, weapons, and rum worth $300 for a 36-mile-long and 3-mile-wide strip of coastal land. This was at gunpoint, too. In 1824, the settlement called Christopolis was renamed Monrovia after American President James Monroe. And the colony was formerly called Liberia, the free land, possibly inspired by the term liberation. Liberia established a constitution known as the Constitution Government and digest of laws of Liberia. Let me read that one more time. Liberia established a constitution known as the Constitution Government and digest of the laws of Liberia. Sovereign authority and power, however, remained with the American Colonization Society, a privately owned company. The Africans in America who were originally sent from the plantations of the United States to establish this new African American nation were handpicked and considered safe for the project. These African Americans, or Americo-Liberians, formed an elite society which established the same inequality for Africans in Africa that Africans in America were trying to overcome. These African Americans basically replicated the same social inequality and political injustice that had limited their own lives in the United States. So the same thing white folks were doing in the United States, they came to Africa and did to the native Africans. Stupid. In fact, this unjust situation helped to sabotage the African unity plans of Marcus Garvey. Liberia became the center of confusion when diamond companies assisted in the funding of civil wars in neighboring Sierra Leone and in Liberia itself. More recently, like when this book was written, Liberian President Charles Taylor was accused of using his government and military to assist in the moving and sale of blood diamonds, diamonds that mainstream rappers ignorantly promoted to the African American community during the 1990s. So, is this what happened when African Americans govern? Is this what happens when African Americans govern a country? On another note, why are Africans in America so ignorant of Liberia if Liberia was set up as a refuge for Africans in America? Regardless of the condition of Liberia itself, why are African Americans not even interested in governing or even participating in a land said to be established for them, for us? Another yet different example of African American self-governance comes through the story of the Hebrew Israelites. Bev Smith, a respected figure in the African American community, was the weekly host of a television show called Our Voices, which aired on the Black Entertainment Television BET network. In one episode, she investigates the Hebrew Israelites. Quote, "Hi, I'm Bev Smith, and I've traveled to the Holy Land and a very special place called Dimona, Israel, to bring you this special edition of Our Voices. Since 1967, hundreds of African Americans have been returning to Israel, stating that they have a claim, a rightful claim as Hebrew Israelites to the Holy Land. The debate continues as the U.S. and Israeli governments ponder the question, why Israel and not Africa? Ms. Smith continues, Israel is called the Holy of Holy Lands in the world, the land of milk and honey, the place where Moses led former slaves out of bondage. It's a land where politics and religion have gone hand in hand for thousands of years. It's no surprise that a group of African Americans, descendants of slaves themselves, would seek out the promised land for their freedom. Frustrated with America's racism and feeling disenfranchised from American society, they journeyed to Israel for a taste of freedom. I wanted to know why these blacks felt they had a claim to Israel. So I went to the city of Dimona, where they settled, and I learned that it began with a dream, a vision had by Ben Ami, A-M-M-I, Ben, B-E-N, Ami, A-M-M-I. The man they call the anointed spiritual leader of the African Hebrew Israelites, end quote. Miss Smith then asked Ben Ami Ben as Israel, quote, how did you know that the words and its vision were truly sent from God? End quote. Ben Ami Ben Israel responded in a calm and honest voice, saying, quote, I did not know. You know, that's the key element to faith. See, the words were so powerful when the angel Gabriel came to bring the message that it was time to start the journey back. I did not know. As a matter of fact, I felt like Moses in the wilderness of sin. I really wanted to talk a little bit more to Gabriel and to ask him to show me his credentials and to pose the question to the Creator, how would I know if these things would truly come to pass? But that was it. I had to walk out on the water by faith, not knowing if these things truly would come to pass or not. There was no further message at that time except that it was time to declare the Exodus in 1967. There I was in February of 1966, pondering how would I convince any significant number of African Americans to, in fact, leave the United States in less than 2 years, end quote. Bev Smith then asks, quote, but did you question in your soul and in your spirit why Israel and not Africa? Or was it one and the same to you, end quote. Ben Ami responds, quote, at that time, you know, I know that Israel was northeastern Africa, only to be separated by the Suez Canal. But there was so many things that I did not know at the time when the word of God did come, end quote. The point is that the opportunities for self-governance seems to keep returning to the African American community. And each time, only a few African Americans ever heed the call. Those African Americans that do seize upon the opportunities for real political and cultural independence always seem to have to divorce themselves from the African American community, becoming an entirely different sect of people altogether. The question then for us today is, are we prepared to heed the call in our generation? Can we create and then govern ourselves? Create and then govern ourselves. This would be the true origin of hip-hop, a civilization established first as art in the minds of enlightened African Americans, but then manifested as a raceless civilization of self-expressed human beings. Like butterflies evolving from caterpillars, we would go from being African and American to fully human, from being European to fully human, from Asian, from Latino, from Aboriginal to fully human. Such a civilization would stand as a beacon of true light to all the world, because finally it would be your God-given talent and innate abilities that would propel you toward varying degrees of prosperity and social admiration. Corruption would be lessened dramatically because leaders would be chosen not on the basis of what they propose to do, but instead upon what they have already done. Talent, not inheritance, would rule. Such a civilization would reward talent, so talent would flourish. In such a civilization, health would be the law, and our hip-hop government would teach health and provide its citizenry with basic health care. The same would apply to love. Yes, love. Love can be taught and rewarded by the courts, even modified with each successive generation. Hate would be against the law. Like rape, it would be criminal to hate. In a truly unified society where humanity reigns over individual races, the pursuit of human awareness would be the norm and properly taught in public education. Such an educational system, backed up by an impartial court system, that rewarded talent and promoted human well-being above individual races would then produce the best minds in the world, and all life would benefit from such an enlightened nation. Such a civilization would honor the ancestry of every race and put humanity in direct relation with the unified fabric of the universe itself. This would be the true origin of hip-hop. And there it is. What we have next, I'll read next week, is the shout-outs. And this basically completes our gospel. There's a test that I'm putting together now based on the highlights and based on common knowledge, hip-hop common knowledge. It's the true hip-hopper test, that after you've read the gospel, you take this test, and if you pass this test, you get the opportunity to move into that next phase of learning, which now you can see is at 55 Ludlow and at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx. These are the classrooms that we're going to be training true hip-hop teachers out of. If you are a hip-hop teacher, or you like to become a hip-hop teacher, now's the time. As you can see, God is raising us up. As you can see, the ancestors are leading us toward victory over the streets. And so this is the gospel of hip-hop. And I thank you all for listening to us today. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to listen to the gospel of hip-hop, and KRS-ONE read it to you and explain it to you. You're on your way to becoming an authentic hip-hop teacher, and I thank you for that. Our nation needs it, and nations around the world need it. Until next week, this is the Temple of Hip-Hop. I am KRS-ONE. I thank you for learning. I thank you for learning. Thank you. Peace.